If you ever want to stop the Fizzle Bomber, you'll never get another chance.
Hiya. I'm going to do a little tiny film review of a film which is excellent called Predestination. Sorry if you hear cars going by in this review. It's a blazing hot day in June, I think 26 degrees C, which is not something us Brits can endure very well. And it's just like, it's like a furnace in here, so I have to keep the windows open. Predestination stars Ethan Hawke, Sarah Snook and Noah Taylor. Those are the main three actors. There are other ones as it goes through, but they're not the focus so much. And obviously, again, if you believe in spoilers, don't watch my review, watch the film, because I just spew spoilers on automatic, and if you're into that sort of spoiler culture, then you might want to skip this until you've seen the film, because this is I'm going to be talking about the film as if I've seen it and you've seen it. Yeah. So the film starts with a terrorist attack. There's this terrorist known as the Fizzle Bomber, and they're bombing targets around New York in 1975, and this agent is sent to try and stop this bomber, and they stop the attack but they burn their face, and as they're undergoing reconstructive surgery to the face, they're given another mission, and the story sort of cuts away from there.
The Fizzle Bomber. The explosion will leave over 11,000 dead.
Then two people meet in a bar.
Fifth attack by the Fizzle Bomber.
Maybe he's doing the city a favor.
That kind of talk can get you in trouble.
The worst than I've already been through.
There's something this job has taught me, is that truth is stranger than fiction.
You're not talking about bartending, are you?
I'm not talking about bartending.
There's the bartender, played by Ethan Hawke, and there's the person walking into the bar, played by Sarah Snook. Sarah Snook's character walks in. She is in makeup playing a he, so she is playing a guy, it seems, and this he called John got a very youngish face, and you know, you can see sort of that it's a woman playing a man. You can sort of tell she looks a bit like a teenage boy, or like a younger boy playing a man, or a woman playing a man. And she comes up to the bartender and orders a drink. She bets the bartender that if she can tell an amazing story that he hasn't heard before, then she wins a bottle of whiskey. And he's like, go on then, I've heard them all though. I've heard all the weird and wacky stories in my time working in this bar. What have you got for me? So she begins telling him sort of her life story, or his life story, but it does begin with her saying, when I was a little girl, and he's like, what? And so you assume she's trans or something, because this kind of boyish, like, man in a trench coat at the bar is telling the bartender the story of how she began life as a little girl. She was left on the front step of an orphanage as a foundling when she was a baby. Someone had stolen her away and left her at this orphanage, and she begins growing up as a little girl, and everything seems normal, and then when she's younger, she realizes she has aptitudes that none of the other girls have. She's stronger, she's more intelligent. She knows that there's something wrong about her, something different. As she grows up to be a teenager or young adult, she signs up for this thing called the Space Corps, which is basically the school where she learns how to grow up with the goal of joining kind of the space program. The space program is hiring kind of women with high intelligence and high aptitudes to accompany the men in the space program. But they're only taking on, like as with most space agencies, they're only taking on the most gifted, the cleverest, the strongest, the ones with the most stamina, the ones that survive the most intense training and study well. As time goes on, with her being taught in Space Corp, she meets an agent there who's in control of a certain section of the school called Robertson, like an old black-haired man in a suit. with a moustache. He's played by Noah Taylor, who you may remember if you've seen Vanilla Sky, the Tom Cruise remake of the, I think it's Open Your Eyes, the Spanish film. He's in that, in a similar sort of role. Anyway, he's a shady agent guy, and he informs her that she's been disqualified from the space agency because they've run a physical on her, and they've found out that there's something maybe wrong with her body. So she gets kicked out of the space agency. She becomes like this housewife doing crappy jobs, like helping out families in their homes, like a 50s housewife type thing. And to pass the time, she reads personals and agony aunt magazines, like confession articles from a woman's perspective, and she reads those, and eventually she ends up kind of writing them. While she's not working in Space Corp, she bumps into this tall, dark and handsome stranger. They kind of start going out as boyfriend and girlfriend and have a short relationship. This guy seems to know a lot about her without her having met him, and then when she's sitting on a park bench one day, he gets up and leaves, and she never sees him again. Then Agent Robertson gets in contact with her again, saying that he doesn't just work for the Space Corp, but he runs something called the Temporal Agency.
We work for an organization whose primary purpose is reshaping wrongdoings.
And they want to recruit her because they need people with extra special skills for their assignments that they're doing. But then when running another medical on her, they find out that she's pregnant. So she's probably pregnant from this lover that walked out on her. So they take her in, and she goes unconscious during the birth and has a C-section. And then when she wakes up from the birth, they say the doctor comes in and goes like, your child's fine, your child's okay, it's you we're more worried about. And they tell her that during the cesarean section, they realised that the birth was extra complicated and that she had both male and female genitalia. And they said the male genitalia survived the pregnancy fine, but the female genitalia, there was too much bleeding, and they basically thought the best thing to do was remove that and leave her with the male genitalia. And from now on, she had to live as a man. And the doctor's like, don't worry, it's not a death sentence. You could have died, but instead you're gonna live as a man now. And she finds this really hard to digest. You know, she's got a baby, but now she's got to try and become a man. She finds it really difficult, and you know, she's practicing with her voice, trying to get it deeper, and looking at herself in the mirror. You know, now they've reformed her body to be as close as they can get it to a man's body. Then after that point, she's in the hospital wards, and she leaves her baby unattended for a while, and it's stolen by an unknown man and taken away from the hospital. So at first her name was Jane Doe, and then she changed her name to John Doe, and she started writing these kind of magazine articles about kind of confessions and personals and kind of agony aunt stuff from a woman's perspective. So she's been telling the bartender this story the whole time, and she comes to the end of the story and he's like, not bad, and gives her the whiskey as her winnings for telling the unbelievable story. And then they kind of get drunk together that night in the pub. At this point, Jane or John confesses in bitterness that she's had a horrible life and she's got so much kind of anger and rage, she just sometimes wishes she could like take it out on people, sort of thing. And the bartender sort of agrees, like he's got that sort of similar mindset, and they kind of share that bitter past sort of thing. And she's like, if it wasn't for that ex-lover who came out of the blue one day and then just left me, then I wouldn't have had to go through all this. I wouldn't have had a kid who was stolen. I wouldn't have to change my sex to male and try and fit in. Everything would have basically been the same. And then the bartender turns to her, and suddenly things aren't as they seem, because he goes, well, what if I could put the guy in front of you, this guy who walked out on you, this ex-lover who, you know, got you pregnant all those years back? Would you kill the guy? And she's like, what the hell? What? And he confesses that he's an agent of the Temporal Agency that she almost signed up for. And that he, the bartender, is trying to track down the Fizzle Bomber and kill him. The implication is that the Fizzle Bomber might be this guy who went out with her all those years back, and that he's got insider information on who this guy's been dating as he's trying to track him down. And so she reluctantly follows him downstairs and takes on the job for the temporal agency that she was going to take before but never got the chance to. So the bartender says to Jane, John, if I help you kill your ex-lover who happens to be the Fizzle Bomber, then you have to do something for me. You have to take over my job for me so I can retire. The bartender snaps out this guitar case, it looks like, and Jane's like, what the hell's that? What the hell?
So what is it?
It's a time machine. Deep breath.
And it's got little numbers on the side like you get on a padlock, but as he twists the numbers you can see that they're forming a date, and he tells her that the temporal agency is actually kind of a time travel group who go through time and assassinate people to correct things.
We're in 1963.
That's impossible. So what, you're a cop?
I'm a temporal agent. We prevent crime before it takes place.
Kind of like Minority Report, they're going back in time to try and stop crimes before they happen. And what happens is the bartender takes Jane, John through time to the day when their ex-lover was gonna leave her on the park bench.
You can do this. If you prove yourself,
Do I have a choice?
you always have a choice.
Right.
She has to find this guy before he meets her former girl self, her former girl self, and starts going out with her and kill him there and then, or as soon as he can. And so he goes to the place where the girl version of himself first bumps into the mysterious man, and he can't find the man, he can't find the Fizzle Bomber anywhere. He's like looking around, it's like, what the fuck? And then the girl version of himself bumps into him, and he starts talking, and he realizes he's saying things that were said to him back in time all those years ago, and with slow realization and astonishment he realizes that he is this person, and he knows he's not the Fizzle Bomber, so he's like, well, hold on, I'm the person who fell in love with myself due to this time travel thing all those years back. And they realise they've formed a kind of paradox. And this is called the Predestination paradox. And at this point, the audience will start piecing things together, like who is Jane and what's been going on through this story she's been telling, really, because she meets this lover, and the lover is herself from the future, and the time travelling coupling gives birth to this baby, and the baby has both male and female genital organs, which is probably some kind of mutation due to the time travel process. The baby is stolen from the hospital by a later version of John, who puts it on the doorstep of the orphanage, where it grows up to be Jane, and then eventually becomes the mother that gives birth to himself via having sex with himself, and then the child is stolen from the mother, and she grows up all bitter and eventually walks into a bar and meets the bartender, who takes her back in time to become the lover who has sex with himself. So right then and there you're like, whoa, this is confusing as fuck. He is his own, and she's him, and the baby's him from them, and like, so you've got Jane and John's entire, storyline, where 3 different characters are revealed as one person right there. But then after that it gets even more complicated, because they're still trying to track down the Fizzle Bomber. And who is the Fizzle Bomber? Well, you could very easily guess as the audience who the Fizzle Bomber is going to be, but it's not clear, so you're waiting to find out, you keep watching. So when the bartender leaves Jane or John Doe to go on this mission and actually fall in love with his former self, he goes off in time with his guitar case to 1975 New York to try and stop the Fizzle Bomber. And then you realise you're at that scene at the start of the film, where it's a different part of that scene you didn't quite see, where he's trying to stop the Fizzle Bomber setting off the bomb, but he starts having a fight with this random guy in a ponytail and a cap who's come out of nowhere. That he has a fight with this guy, and then he escapes back to the temporal agency, the time machine, time travelling spy agency, and he says, "Sorry, I couldn't complete my mission," to Robertson. "I'll try again." And Robertson's like, oh, fuck it, one more time for you, bartender. I'll give you one more chance to stop the Fizzle Bomber, and bring that Jane John here. I'll give her a chance to stop the Fizzle Bomber as well. Because it turns out the more times you jump with the guitar case time machines, and the further in time back and forth you jump, which apparently you can only jump like 50 years forward or 50 years back. Those are like the limits on these time machines. And the more times you jump and the further you jump, the more you're at risk of health defects or mental instability, and you can like screw with your own mind, or you can screw with time in the wrong way. So the temporal agency is like there to make sure you only go a certain amount and you keep within the rules. So Robertson says to the time agent bartender, "Right, this is your last mission, so no more time travel for you after this. When you get to 1975 New York, it's your last mission, and your time machine will decommission itself automatically. And when that happens, you do your mission to stop the Fizzle Bomber and you retire where you are in time. You stay there." They teleport the bartender guy to 1975 in the future, near the date the Fizzle Bomber will set off the big bomb that kills thousands of people, and his machine starts to decommission. And then he looks at the guitar case and it says like, error, failed to decommission, and he's a bit confused, but he continues his mission. Now Jane John, who's at the temporal agency still, teleports out with a briefcase, guitar case, time machine to the Fizzle Bomber, and then they get their mission to try and stop the Fizzle Bomber from planting the bomb. And then you realise you're in the actual scene at the start of the movie. They try to stop the bomb going off from the Fizzle Bomber, but they get their face badly burnt, and this dark figure comes out of nowhere to push the guitar case time machine to badly burnt Jane, who's lying on the floor kind of in agony, and he pushes the guitar case to her so she can reach it and teleport out to a hospital. And just before she does it, she looks up and she realises it's the bartender there who is somehow helping her escape back to the hospital. With her badly burnt face, she teleports back to the temporal agency and they put her in hospital, and she's all bandaged up. And then when she removes the bandages, she's badly scarred, but the more she looks in the mirror, she realises, I'm the bartender as well. I look like the bartender, now my face is scarred. And so the bartender is also Jane John. And now she grows up, older, and eventually goes into the bar to meet her former self, bitter after all her life's tragedies, and listens to herself telling herself her life story again. Flash cut to the future, where the bartender's time machine has failed to decommission itself. He goes to a laundrette where he knows the Fizzle Bomber will be before the Fizzle Bomber bombs their target. And surprise, surprise, the guy in the ponytail and a cap is actually a really old version of Ethan Hawke's bartender. So the Fizzle Bomber is also Jane. All parts in the movie, all characters in the movie except Robertson and a few people at the orphanage and the temporal agency are Jane John Doe, the same character. And even the Fizzle Bomber terrorist is. This is the first time the bartender realises, like, hold on, the guy I've been trying to stop my entire life is an older version of me. And he's like, fuck this, I'm not going to become you. I will never become you. I'll never become you. We've been playing this game of predestined fate this entire time. Well, can't we take fate into my own hands? He says, well, no, because if you kill me, you will still become me. And he's like, I'll never become you. And then the Fizzle Bomber version of the bartender shows him all these photographs of disasters where loads of people have died, like thousands more people have died than the bombings that he creates, and that he's been going back and forth in time bombing targets in order to stop larger disasters happening that have killed even more people. So it's like the lesser of two evils. Like you kill a lesser amount of people in order to prevent something happening that would kill a greater amount of people. So he's picking the lesser of two evils. And because his time machine didn't decommission, he's been jumping back and forth in time, creating terrorist events, basically. But he's like revealing to Bartender that this is in order to save a greater amount of people. And the bartender's like, no, I can't ever become you. You're still killing people. You're still killing people to do it. You know, it's by your hand. It's like you've jumped too many times using the time travel device, and the psychosis and the insanity that's meant to happen, like to your mental health when you use the time machine too many times, has happened, and you've just gone insane. And he kills him there, like with like 6 gunshots or more, and then the movie ends with like a flashback of like every stage of John Doe's life, from baby to little girl, you know, all the way up to this. And he's just like in this apartment he's retired into with his time machine that refused to decommission. And he's like got a drink or something, and he's like, ah.
The path you're on will take you to your destination.
I'm gonna end up doing it, aren't I? I'm gonna get old and I'm gonna become the terrorist that I wanted to stop my entire life. So apparently this is based on a Robert A. Heinlein book called -- All You Zombies -- about time travel paradoxes. I haven't read it, but yeah. And I really love this film. It's a fantastic film. Just the simple concept of, well, I suppose it's not simple at all, is it? It's ridiculously overcomplicated. Yeah, it's just a fantastic plot. All the characters in the film, all the like several different characters in the film are all one character, and it's just revealed to you bit by bit, and through the gimmick of time travel, that all these people can be the same. It's like the grandfather paradox. Like, how can you go back in time and kill your own grandfather if it would mean you would suddenly not exist, except you would exist because you'd have to be there to have killed your grandfather. These are the things that fascinate people about time travel. And I'm reading The Time Ships at the moment, so I've got a double dose of kind of time travel in my mind going on. The performances in this film are fantastic. I mean, Ethan Hawke is pretty much fantastic in so many films I've seen. Gattaca, Before Sunrise, Good Kill. There are so many films that I've liked that have Ethan Hawke in. He's a great actor. But the surprise performance of this one was someone that I haven't really heard of before, the Sarah Snook character, who plays the young Jane Doe as a woman and John Doe as a kind of late teenage, early adult man who comes in the bar. That actress is fantastic, and I don't know how much stuff she's been in before now. I think I looked at her filmography and it was kind of small. Yeah, she's only been in a handful of films from 2010 to now. It seems like she's still working. There's a 2018 film she's in, I think. And in this movie she's fantastic. She does the job really well, and I love the interplay between Ethan Hawke and her, especially in the bar when they're kind of telling stories to each other. It's just like really fantastic and atmospheric. I love how the film's treated pretty seriously, and you're only given just enough information to get by on what the time travel is and how it works. For instance, the first time they time travel, I think the bartender finds some gear like on a shelf, and the Sarah Snook, Jane Doe character's like, well, how the fuck would you know that stash that you put there would be there? Because you're just jumping back and forth in time, so you would have had to, you know, it's just alluded to briefly, and he's like, forget about it, don't worry, we know what we're doing. So you're only just given, you're not given the details of the time travel, you're just given enough information to get by. That's a fantastic film, well shot, great makeup effects, great performances, Brilliant script. Check it out, definitely, if you haven't seen it. And you don't mind the spoilers, so you've obviously watched this review. But if you have seen it, it's great, isn't it? I'd watch it again. It's a brilliant film. This is my second time watching it. The other night for this review, and yeah, it's a great film. Predestination. Check that shit out.
There's one thing this job has taught me, is that truth is stranger than fiction.